Alright. There we got two things. Let's cut to that. Alright. We'll just dump them out here. And just go. We got My Hero Academia, You're Next. This is Blu-ray only. Next, it's your turn. And I don't think I already have this, but if I'm wrong, then well, I guess I have duplicates. Whatever. The big problem is I don't remember the names of any of the movies. The one or two I already have. So yeah, regions A, B, and C. The interesting thing is, it doesn't look like this is Crunchyroll. Oh well, and then on the inside, we've got all this. Okay. Straightforward. And then the other thing is Berserk of Gluttony. That's a region AB. English dub and Japanese with English subtitles. And justice to greed and gluttony. I'm trying to remember what I thought about it. Imperfect. But it is what it is, what it is, what it is, what it is. Okay. And we've got disc 1 and disc 2. It's kind of hard to see that image perfectly, but hold on. Let's sit down just a little bit. There we go. Alright. Well, quick update, but yeah, here it is. Here's this week's Physical Anime Collection update.
Alright, let's talk real quickly about anime. There's a lot of new stuff that aired, and I watched the first season of the Apothecary Diaries. I think I might have mentioned last week I was considered it. Sorry, hiccups. I don't remember if I was mentioning it to y'all or to a coworker. But yeah, I'd say it was pretty good. Probably most interesting, I would call the first episode a great first episode. I think it alone would give you a good idea of whether or not it's the kind of show you might like. It shows its main two characters. It gives you a good idea of their setting. It gives you a good idea of, I guess, their interesting idiosyncrasies to at least a beginning extent, enough to entice. It shows some clever writing, setup, pacing, art. You know, a lot of things about that first episode that I think just worked out really well. For the whole season, you know, season 1 had 2 core. The first core, it's interesting because it feels like there was a trade-off between the cores, and that the first one felt like every moment was a lot more relevant to what was going on right then and there, but I think core 2 feels like it was maybe just overall more noteworthy to a certain degree. So it's like, it's interesting sort of feeling that you've just binge watching the entire first season, and then overall, you know, just, you know, it was good. So overall, really liked season 1. I have to figure out now what that means I'm going to do with season 2, because some of it's airing right now, and I did watch this all dubbed, and I can't really say whether or not the dub was better than subbed. Usually it is. And I would expect that to kind of be the case here, but I found just going into this with just the dub and only having the dub, it was pretty great. So, don't know what I'm going to do with Season 2, but I figured I would at least stop with Season 1, and maybe I'll give myself a little bit of a breather. It's hard to say, because, I kind of spent the weekend watching it, so kind of wanted to keep going, but plenty of other things to do. Let me see, we had the first episode of The Beginning After the End, and I actually thought it was off to a pretty good start. There's definitely elements of it that are just like, okay, sort of Jobless Reincarnation-esque. Didn't feel like it had as much budget, and it's like, so is this a discount? And I don't think it feels that way, and I think the main thing is, well, it does kind of play with this, okay, both these characters are clearly reborn and older than their years. There's a different journey that they're going through, and Jobless Reincarnation is pretty great, and there's observations and stuff I've made about that one. For this one, I think the thing that sold me on the first episode was how it ended, and it's not just like, okay, yeah, he did do something awesome, and now they're like, oh, well, he's a little bit of a genius, but I feel like there was a bit more of a, he isekai'd and wasn't settling into the idea of just becoming a family. I mean, how would it feel like to you if you just suddenly isekai'd and you're a baby, but you had all your memories and emotions and feelings and whatever from right now? Would you bond as strongly with your parents in your isekai or whatnot? It doesn't even have to be an isekai. You could just say, what if, you got hit by a truck today and then tomorrow you're in some hospital in Nebraska? It's hard to say, and I think this show is slightly, at least the first episode was slightly more focused on that, because it's establishing how the main character, I don't know, it just felt a lot more personal, that element of it. Like, okay, yeah, if you've ever seen a show that exercised something that plenty of other isekai have done, but it's like, okay, but we want to focus on this one thing. Sometimes that works out. First episode of The Beginning After the End, I thought it was off to a pretty good start. Let me see. Too Perfect Saint, tossed aside by my fiancé and sold to another kingdom, episode 1. I also thought this was off to a good start. If anything, my complaint was, I would have two complaints. One of those is, there's definitely all these negative people set up around the main character, and it might be a little too on the nose. But at the same time, I think what made it work out is the first episode ends with a, okay, yeah, that's that. But it makes it sets things up so it's like, okay, maybe she's about to be appreciated. We want to see her be appreciated. And the way the first episode ended gave a lot of hope for that, and just it's like, well, I want to see the next episode. Now, I'm not sure that it's necessarily a sold on this on the first episode. I mean, the other one wasn't either. We have to see where it goes from there. But Too Perfect Saint, I think it's a good first start. Let's kind of see what the next episode say. This is the kind of show you can expect continuing to watch us going forward. I think that's what's missing from both of them, and other than that, I think they're decent enough hooks. Off to good starts. Let me see, we had the last episode of The Daily Life of a Middle-Aged Online Shopper in Another World, episode 13, right? I don't know that that's the end of the series. No. They did start kind of hinting that if there's a season 2, or core 2, or whatever, then it's about that other person we've heard about. Not starring them necessarily, but maybe drawing our attention more in that direction, I guess. And overall, I guess it was an okay episode. It just sort of was, Middle-aged online shopper has its moments. Nothing too strong, but overall it was okay, I guess. Brilliant Healer's New Life in the Shadows, episode 1. That was a bad first episode, which is unfortunate because it's a premise with a lot of promise. They don't even necessarily have to do anything like too spectacular with it. Like the idea of, okay, he's a brilliant healer. He's got a back alley unlicensed clinic. It's like, okay, so does that mean he spends the time? And I'm noticing that I did not line his camera upright. Does he spend the time following up interesting medical mysteries or dealing with weird corrupt politicians, etc., etc.? The problem with how it started is first it began, okay, well, this is going to be one of the shows where we introduce the harem first. After he's already established himself, okay, it's really easy to get addicted to origin stories, I guess. So it not being an origin story is fine. Problem is this interaction with the harem would be a pretty forgettable mid-episode if it happened, but the fact that it begins here is bad. So, we're introduced to the characters, and the real problem is their struggle. It's like, why does the show begin with the struggle that has absolutely nothing to do with the premise of the show? You're just jumping into the middle of things in a bad way, and even worse. So, we have the lolly elf girl who's taking care of him, and it's like, okay, I'm not sure based on later conversations if she's actually a kid or if it's just, elves take forever to grow, and so she's, for all intents and purposes, an adult taking care of him with just a very childish attitude. But she's fine. She's taking care of him. It's like, okay, yeah. There's usually a character like that in the harems, and that's fine. But then they introduce the lizard girl and that fox or wolf or dog girl, or I guess that's a canine girl, and they introduce maybe ogre girl. And all their character designs look fine, their voice actors are fine, but then their actions in the very beginning is just like, wow, you're pieces of shit. You're wasting air by breathing. Why do we suffer your existence? It's infuriating. And you shouldn't be doing this to your character. You shouldn't be doing this in a side episode in the middle of the show, but that's the very first thing you're doing in your show. You're just introducing these characters, just like, son of a fucking bitch. I hate these people. And they get better. They're just very, that they have to make them very, oh, I forgot the ghost girl. It's hard to know much about her. She just sort of showed up. She didn't really do much. Nothing bad, but it's like those other three girls. Then for the second half of the episode, it finally gets kind of towards what it is about, but it introduces a noble who's just the most on-the-nose, bad kind of person you could get. It's like, does his badness even make sense for the badness that it is? It feels like it feels overdone. And it doesn't do a good job of really making us feel strongly, because while our main character did the right stuff, it's just like, okay, it went for way too easy a first episode. So if there's any reason I continue watching, it's because I guess I don't have anything else on Thursdays or Fridays right now. So I guess we'll have to see if maybe I'll just give it a couple more episodes to see if it gets better. But Jesus Christ, bad first episode. Let me see. Next up on the list is I've Been Killing Slimes for 300 Years and Maxed Out My Level. Season 2, Episode 1. I didn't care so much for it, but I never cared for the first season as well. And I kind of feel like maybe for the same reasons I didn't care for this. So it means Season 2 is probably off to a fine start if you really liked it. But it'd definitely be interesting if y'all had a different opinion on that. But that was just my observation. Let's see. We also have From Old Country Bumpkin to Master Swordsman, Episode 1. I think it's off to an okay start. Much better than a lot of the other stuff that Amazon tends to get. Like, there's been other neat stuff, but in terms of, like, I guess it's neat. It's reminiscent of the one where the guy's daughter became an S-rank adventurer. And he's actually really badass himself. He just isn't really aware of it because he's just kind of old and experienced and not very confrontational. But it turns out that his just his expertise is there, and this one has it too. This one I feel was a little on the nose, but it's at least the goal is, okay, these people just know he's actually really good at it, and he just needs to get out there and start doing stuff and, you know, make a name for himself or have his own adventure or something like that. And you know, some of the stuff was a little on the nose too. It's like, okay, yeah, so the first two students he talks to, it's like, oh yes, you were so legendary. It's like, I don't know if they would definitely say he was. You know, I guess you kind of got to assume that while he was teaching them, when they reached the point where they graduated, they still realized just how much of a gap. And as they've gotten better on their own, they realized, man, I still just can't measure up to that instructor I had. Man, he really knew what he was doing. And I think this first episode mostly works out because even though there's those two girls, they do introduce a guy to the group, somebody that never trained on him, and he had a simple lesson with him, and it's just like he became a groupie, I guess. I don't know. And for some reason, it just felt like it worked as a set. We'll have to see how the rest of it goes, but I think it's a pretty good first episode. Let me see. Unwear Atelier Meister, episode 2. It says Master on my thing there, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be Meister because I think Crunchy says Meister, and in the show they say Meister all over the place. I think, while it is definitely comparable to Kid from Last Town Boonies in the beginning towns, while it is reminiscent of that one had a world set up that kind of made sense in a way that this one feels like it's sort of missing. So I don't think it's as good as that one, which may be unfortunate because I know some people who maybe didn't quite like the old one, but like they knew people who did, and so they're just not going to watch this with them because, you know, that connection doesn't work. And it's amusing, but it feels like it beggars belief, I guess. It doesn't quite feel quite real, I guess. But I guess it was somewhat entertaining, you know. He did some entertaining stuff. I guess we'll see what it does from here. The Gorilla Gods Go-To Girl, episode 1. I actually really liked this one. You know, there's some decent first episodes in there, and I guess it's again not a complete one because it's hard to tell just from the first episode if we can guess what episode by episode is going to be like after this. But it's fun. It's interesting because I think last season there was the first episode of a show that I watched where a girl gets isekai'd, but she's the leader of these special kind of warlock guys or something like that. And I had this complaint where that one's like, okay, yeah, if you're building your reverse harem, but she's literally doing nothing the whole episode. She's just kind of standing there saying, huh, what's going on? And then she's just standing there while people are talking to her. You know, she doesn't do a whole lot. Whereas this one's fun because she does a whole lot. The situation sets it up so that she can, and then she just ends up experiencing these things because she's been blessed by the Gorilla God, and that's a very rare God blessing. And so, you know, she's got athletic prowess, but she's a very common, shy, doesn't want to be noticed kind of girl. So it's you know, it's a fun contrast, and she's doing stuff and not even necessarily, oh, it's fun because she's getting noticed, but it's like she's trying to do stuff and she's finding that things are a little surreal in a fun way. So, you know, I think off to a fun start. If there's any complaint I have for it, it's that episode 1 didn't cover, again, enough to know what this would be like episode by episode. But I'd also worry, you know, probably this will be a good 3-episode measure series, as in, like, we'll probably have a good idea. The main problem is, like, first episode doesn't end the beginning shenanigans. It's still kind of in the middle of it, which means that as long as they're still doing that, you kind of would have trouble telling if this will be the kind of show you might enjoy on a day-to-day basis. But, you know, promising first episode. Next up, Yandere Dark Elf. She Chased Me All the Way from Another World, episode 1. It's another what's the thing? Fan service. It's another risque kind of show. Makes sense. You know, Hot Dive does get quite a few of those. Hard to say if anything about it feels particularly standoutish about this first episode. Because, you know, the yandere element of it doesn't feel notable. The fact that she's from another world and is now in Japan is only very lightly touched on. To be fair, it was only a half episode, so instead of an entire, you know, taking up a 30-minute block, so 20 minutes of runtime, it's about 10 minutes of runtime for half that time. So, hard to say for certain if it's definitely going to have more to it. I might give it and watch it just because 10 minutes every Sunday night might not be that hard to give. But, you know, that one's on the, you know, in the at-risk category. Not as strongly as Brilliant Healer's New Life, but, you know, it's in there. And then last but not least, we have episode 2 of Sword of the Demon Hunter. Which, interestingly, last week I noted that it looked like it jumped forward into the modern times, but I heard that it didn't actually play out in the modern times. And so it's a bit of a strange stinger to put at the end of that first episode, because, you know, maybe it gives the idea of he's telling the story of how everything led up to that, but it doesn't feel like episode 2 is really doing that. And episode 2 is, you know, back closer to the origin of all this stuff. You know, only 10 years after the first episode instead of 170 years. So still feudal-ish Japan. But, yeah. And it wasn't a bad episode. It was interesting how, even though it didn't seem like... It seemed like it was a one-off episode. It's like, okay, so is this show doing one-off demon mysteries from now on? If it is, you know, that could be okay. Could be quite entertaining and watchable. Hard to say if there's a good feeling of meaning in there, per se. Because, you know, the first episode set up an end goal. And I don't know what it'll mean to see the character meander or not get closer or get closer or whatnot. And this episode, it turns out, doesn't actually answer that question either, because it didn't seem like it was that relevant, but then bits and pieces of it, it's like, okay, now I see why this episode exists. And it's not just in a vacuum. So, we'll have to see what more this series has to show, but I thought it was an entertaining episode. I'm trying to think if episode 1 gives any thoughts into what this episode should have been that were maybe unfulfilled, but I guess I'm not sure. I'm kind of hurrying through this without talking too fast, you know, giving y'all your time, because, you know, I'm here recording for y'all. But, you know, I do have Dead by Daylight to play. They started an event. I need to spend some time on it. But I don't think there's much to really talk about there. The new killer, I guess, came out last week, and I had fun the few times I played with him, played against him. I've never played as him. I've been playing only Survivor. But at my MMR, we're not getting a lot of them, and the few people we do get, you know, I tend to let killers kill me. I tend to let survivors go. I'm low MMR. No effort. You know, obviously, at this point, I'm much better than a lot of the people I'm playing against, but that says more about my lack of doing things than it says anything bad about them, right? So, you know, it just is what it is, and it means that I at least have not been tortured by the new killer. So, you know, down where people are still trying to figure things out, it's been fun playing against him. I think the person I played with also had fun there, but maybe he also just doesn't have a good feeling for all 40-something killers to say, yeah, that one is kind of sussy. I think on paper, I agree with a lot of stuff that people are saying that says that he needs to be tweaked a bit. And I'm not sure if tweaking is quite the right way to fix him, because there's some things that aren't, like, adjusting of numbers, mechanics. You know, I think they might have to find something slightly better to do with certain mechanics. And I'm not sure if I know exactly what. But, you know, that's just an observation. A game observation. yeah, I don't know that I really have much else to talk about. I'll go ahead and wrap things up. Y'all, have a nice week.